Hey, welcome to Have a Chat, where I talk with a Spark member in a sort of 20-minute quick coaching call about one issue. Today we're talking with Deb Thompson. Deb, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and kind of give us the background for what we're going to talk about today.
Thanks, Cathy. I'm delighted to join you today and chat about all things fundraising. I am a recent joiner to the fundraising sector and to the charity and not-for-profit sector after a successful career in corporate sales. About a year and a half ago, I joined the sector and worked in a role where I was doing a number of different fundraising activities, sponsorships, major gifts. And now I am completed that contract and ready to look for my next role, and want to talk to you a little bit today about some of the skills that I think I would need to brush up on and to align to the transferable skills I bring to the table. And one specifically that has come up in some of the informational interviews I've been doing is around the ethics of fundraising and aligning CRA guidelines, which as a new fundraiser, I'm coming across it, but would like a little bit more detail about what are some things that I need to learn as I go forward in my fundraising career.
Awesome. Okay. So this is so cool. So what I love about your question is that there is a very concrete piece of it, like, you know, some stuff around ethics and some stuff around CRA guidelines. But what I really like about it too is that you represent a really big cohort of people who are transitioning from another sector into fundraising. So once we answer those, once you talk about those initial questions, maybe we can, it can morph into some stuff around the challenges of being a career transitioner into fundraising, especially from the
Sounds
corporate
great.
sector. Okay, cool. Okay, so CRA regulations. First of all, I'm actually going to plug somebody else. I'm going to plug Mark Bloomberg, who does all kinds of courses around CRA regulations and compliance. So it's totally worth investing in something that Mark does. So Mark's a lawyer with Bloomberg. Oh, I don't remember the name of his firm, but he does tons of charity law. And he does some courses, and he's very thorough and knows his stuff. So if you're looking for a course, you know, check out Mark Bloomberg. It's interesting that you asked this. I mean, it might be something that that we'll create in Spark. So, you know, the big thing, the biggies that I see around CRA compliance are tax receipting, making sure that you have all the right information on your tax receipt. That's literally as simple as going to Canada Revenue Agency site and looking up fundraising guidance, and it tells you what you need to have on there. But you know what, as we're talking, I realize that's something that I can create in Spark and put it in the resources.
That's great.
Yeah. So, and I don't want to minimize it. Like you have to, you know, you have to do what the government asks you to do, but it's pretty clear. Like, you know, have the name and have the charitable registration number and have when you received it and the year that it came from. Anyway, all, you know, those kinds of details are things that are easily enough researched. The other thing that I see people who are kind of newer at fundraising doing that is out of alignment with CRA is it's who they issue receipts to and for what kinds of things. So gifts of services are not eligible for charitable tax receipts. So that means that if somebody's offering you, if I'm offering my fundraising services to your organization, that's not eligible for a receipt. The services are not. So the way that you make that legit is that you might, you know, I might say, all right, I will do, you know, a fundraising review for you. I will charge you X amount. And then once you pay me, I'll make a donation to you. So that's a different story. One of the things you need to be really careful about when it comes to CRA regulations is that a donation can only be a donation if it's voluntary. So if you have any kind of contractual agreement that says, you pay me and then I'll give you a donation, that's no longer voluntary.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's a bit
Got
of
it.
a vague line there, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
I taught this stuff at Ryerson, so all my lecture spiels are coming back to me. So those are the two biggies. Like what I see with a lot of clients when I go in is that they've maybe been not as aligned around who they can issue receipts for and for what things. So you know, one of the big ones is that donations have to be issued in the name of the entity that made the donation. So if Cathy Mann and Associates makes a donation to you, tax receipt has to be named to Cathy Mann and Associates, not to Cathy Mann. Because individual corporations have different tax treatments. So yeah, there are some details like that. Again, one of Mark Bloomberg's courses and you'd have that all sorted out. And you know, I think a lot of us just kind of stumble across this and figure it out as we go along. Hopefully some of us are, you know, started out in bigger organizations that had a very rigorous set of rules around that, and they understood what the rules were. So then you learn it that way. In smaller shops, I see that folks are having to learn it on their own because the organization isn't necessarily doesn't necessarily have the understanding of that. So yeah, I think it's worth you know, learning more about it. I also think it's the sort of thing that you can learn by talking to people who've been in the industry for a while.
People like you.
Like me, yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
And I will say that the rules change periodically. And so like, you know, a couple of years ago, there was a rule change around split receipts. Lots of people are still a bit cloudy about what that means. So if you're in situations like that, you just want to make sure that you're talking with somebody who does it a lot. And so, you know, the good thing about our sector is that we're all pretty collegial. And if I ever had a question about split receipting, that typically we end up seeing in a sort of special event context, I'd be thinking, who do I know who works in a big fundraising shop, who does a lot of special events, because they're going to have this figured out to a T. And I would call that person and say, walk me through this. Yeah,
that's great. Now, the split receipting also, can you touch a little bit upon the in-kind? Because you talked about services, but often, you know, we come across situations where we might have a special event and someone will say, I'm going to give you this percentage of my services in kind, and then I'm also going to include a monetary donation as a, you know, as a sponsor of the event, or can you tell me a little bit about that?
So in-kind donations require like a proper appraisal, and and Canada Revenue Agency allows us some flexibility around who can appraise things. And so you want to have a policy internally around what is an appropriate, who is appropriate to do the appraisal. So, you know, some like there's different ways of approaching it, but certainly I've often looked at, you know, if it's anything over $1,000 and somebody is asking for a tax receipt for it, then it probably needs to be appraised professionally. And then the question is, who's paying for the appraisal? Is it the organization or is it the donor? So one thing. If it's under $1,000 though, you still want to make sure that whoever's appraising it has some expertise. So the best bet is get the invoice for whatever they're donating to you, so that you can say, okay, it was $350. I'll give you an invoice or I'll give you a tax receipt for that amount. That's where it gets a little bit gray. If it's you want to make sure that you have clear policies within your organization to safeguard the organization and the donor, because you don't want to be accused of showing favor to someone because you know them. So having written policies with some guidelines that can help you make decisions around that is really helpful. So I'm going to tell you my story of in-kind donations early in my career. There's two of them. One, I worked for a nursing home, and I had a string of people calling and wanting to drop stuff off and get tax receipts for it, including a woman who dropped off a few garbage bags of yarn, and like not even full skeins of yarn, just like little bits and bobs of yarn, and some patterns of for rug hooks, hooked rugs, and like wanted a big receipt for it. And I was like, well, what am I going to do with little bits and bobs of yarn and half patterns or patterns that have half been done? It was not something that our charity was going to be able to put to use. So I wasn't able to value it to give them a tax receipt. So I'd had a number of these kinds of conversations with people around wanting receipts for these donations. And then someone called one day and said, I have an organ I'd like to donate. And I work for a healthcare organization, like a nursing home. And I'm like, well, we're a nursing home. We don't accept organs, because I thought they were trying to donate their kidney or something.
Their body part. Oh, no.
Anyway, he thought I was a total moron.
Probably, yeah.
Anyway, when I realized what it was, I'm like, oh, let me see if our music therapy program could use an organ. Thank you so much.
You're just in that mindset, right? Wow.
Yeah, that's really what happened.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that, because I was at a session at AFP, and this particular charity was talking about receiving a lot of, they're a children's charity, and they were receiving stuffed animals and just everything, new stuffed animals, used stuffed animals. And one of the things that resonated with me was that they said they tried to go back to their donors and say, what will benefit you and this charity most of all are monetary donations, because we can then take those monetary donations and purchase what we need for our our supporters and our people. So yeah, it's definitely, and I've really tried to emulate that to some extent when you get these odd in-kind requests or I want a receipt for this, and keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And people have an emotional attachment to delivering something that they think is valuable. And stuffed toys are valuable for kids. There's just, that's a tough one to say to somebody, thank you so much. I know this, is really well intentioned, but give us money.
Yeah, so, I know. And it's hard to have a good feeling when you say that. You're right. And it is tough for the charity to say, hey, this is.
It's like food banks, right? Like food banks can be much more efficient if you give them money than if you give them canned goods, right? Because they can buy the kind of stuff they need, they get a discount, but it's human nature. People are, I don't know if we have sort of taught people that that this is a way to do it, but I do think there's a certain element of that sense of gratification of handing something over tangible.
Yeah.
So that one's that's a long one. We've got about 6 minutes left, because I was hoping this would be about this would run about 20 minutes long.
Okay.
Any other questions or conversation that you want to have as somebody who is transitioning from the corporate sector into our fair charitable sector?
Yes, I would love your advice as a fundraising. I call you the fundraising guru, at least, yeah. And you know what? Just advice that you would give someone like me who is looking to articulate my transferable skills. I have a number of them. I came from a sales background, and I have the relationship building and the networking and other things that I might do within the sector to articulate those transferable skills, or just gain more knowledge, and some things I can do in my professional development. And advice you would give me if you were me starting out in the sector, and what I should do.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad that we've got there. You know, I was the academic coordinator of Ryerson University's fundraising management program for a decade, and I had a lot of conversations with people who were transitioning from a different sector into our sector. And overwhelmingly, folks who were coming from the corporate sector were feeling frustrated at how hard it was to get the first job. So you've done that. So you now have fundraising experience. And that is really important because I understand why in fundraising we're sometimes a little bit leery of hiring folks from the corporate sector. And it stems really from this, I don't get this vibe from you at all, but I often have conversations with people from the corporate sector who either explicitly or sort of implicitly basically say, oh, if you guys just did things more the way that we do it in the corporate sector, it'll be easy peasy. Mm-hmm. And I've you know, heard of conversations where someone said, well, I was making you know, 6 figures in my corporate job, and so I would expect to make the same amount in this sector that I know nothing about. So there's a certain amount of arrogance that we sometimes experience from folks in the corporate sector. And so that, I think, is where our discomfort comes from. I think that we could be, and I think we're beginning to be a little bit more imaginative about how the transferable skills that people from other sectors can really support us. And I think that from our perspective, that's what we need to do. We need to look at, you know, the skills that you have and how they can support the work that we're trying to do. It's a big investment, right? Like sort of helping somebody learn the ropes is a big investment. And so that's the other reason why, you know, if we have to choose between hiring someone who has already done it and who has transferable skills, we probably want somebody who's already done it because we know how much time and effort it takes to invest in someone. So that's from our perspective. We need to be a little bit more imaginative about how to use the skills that someone like you has, and perhaps a little less leery and don't necessarily, yeah, well, I'll leave it at that, a little less leery. From your perspective, what you need to be doing is being really careful about the language that you use. Now, you've already been in the sector for 1.5 years, so you've probably experienced some of this. But when I talk with people who've never been in our sector before, they talk so often about how, you know, sales and fundraising is basically the same thing. You're going to get our backs up. Right? I think it's worth talking about, as you said, the transferable skills that you have. I think it's important for you to be, to show some humility and to acknowledge that you have a lot to learn. But you know, you're in this really interesting position now, because you've got 1.5 years of experience. You have really demonstrated that you're committed to investing in yourself. I know that you're doing a lot of professional development because you've done a bunch with me. I've seen you at conferences that I've spoken at. So you're you really want to make the case that you're committed to this industry, and you're gonna, this is where you're staying. And in fact, look, you can see I've done all this, you know, professional development. So because organizations, because there is more professional development available now, there used to be a time where you'd get hired. Okay, I'm dating myself, but there was a time when I started fundraising where you got hired and then you just learned on the job, because there was limited professional development opportunities. There are tons now, and so organizations like to know that you've made a commitment in yourself, or an investment in yourself, so that they're not having to like teach you everything about the sector. So you're actually in a really sweet spot because you've invested in yourself, you've done a ton of professional development, and you've got a year and a half under your belt. So I think what's important for you is to talk about really what you've learned in that first job, and if you can demonstrate how the skills you brought from the corporate sector with what you've learned makes you an even more attractive candidate, that would be pretty cool. And the thing is, you've got corporate sales experience, and I would say that one of the areas that fundraisers could really learn a lot in is the whole corporate side of fundraising, corporate philanthropy, corporate sponsorship. We typically, I would say it's not our strongest suit as a fundraising industry.
Good. That's awesome advice. I really appreciate that. And it's been great chatting with you and learning a little bit more about your perspective on the journey that I'm taking as a newly minted fundraiser. So thanks so much for your advice.
Well, it was great to have a chat with you. Thank you for,
you too.
for joining me. And I look forward to sharing this with all the members of the Spark community at a later date.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right, great.